Welcome to Life Stories, where we share inspiring tales of love, growth, and transformation. Today, we bring you the story of James, a young millionaire who, tired of being seen only for his wealth, decides to work at his own hotel disguised as a common worker. Little does he know, this decision will lead him on a journey of self-discovery, love, and unexpected revelations. Join us as we explore his journey and the profound lessons he learns along the way. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and start today's story with us. I had everything a person could want: money, luxury, a life of comfort that many could only dream of. At 27, I was already the heir to a chain of successful hotels. My name, James Parker, synonymous with wealth and prestige. My days were filled with meetings, business deals, and all the glitz and glamour that came with being a millionaire. But in the quiet moments, the ones when the world slowed down, I felt an emptiness that no amount of money could fill. It wasn't the loneliness that came with solitude. No. I was surrounded by people, wealthy people, influential people, people who worshipped success and power. It was something deeper, more painful. It was the feeling of being invisible, of being seen only as the son of Laura Parker, the owner of the prestigious Parker Hotels. The women who came into my life were drawn to my wealth, my status. They saw me as a ticket to a better life, a way to gain access to everything they ever wanted. But none of them ever truly saw me, the real me. I was more than just my bank account. But no one seemed to care. I confided in my best friend Kevin one evening while we sat in the luxurious bar of an exclusive club. The golden glow of chandeliers and the clinking of crystal glasses only added to my sense of suffocation. I was surrounded by wealth, but I felt poor in the most profound way. "I'm tired of this," I said, swirling the whiskey in my glass. "I'll never find someone who truly loves me." Kevin, who had known me since childhood, thought for a moment before offering an idea that at first seemed absurd. "Why don't you disguise yourself and go work at one of your own hotels?" he suggested, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "You can meet people who don't know who you really are. You might find someone who loves you for who you are, not for your money." I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. What would I do at one of my hotels? What could someone like me possibly do as an employee? Kevin shrugged and smiled, unbothered by my doubts. "Exactly that. Nobody would expect to see a millionaire working as an employee. You'd get a chance to meet real people, away from the shallow world you're living in." The idea lingered in my mind, unsettling yet intriguing. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next morning, after hours of reflection, I made a decision. I would do it. I would take Kevin's advice. I would work at one of my family's hotels, far from the eyes of the city where everyone knew who I was. When I told my mother, Laura Parker, about my plan, her face changed from surprise to concern. She was a strong and determined woman who ran our hotel empire with an iron fist. "What are you thinking, James?" she asked, her voice filled with worry. "You've never worked a day in your life. How will you adapt to this crazy idea?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Mom, I'm tired of being seen only as the millionaire's son. I want a chance to find someone who loves me for who I am, not for my money. I need to do this." She sighed deeply, her gaze softening. "You're an adult now, James. You can make your own decisions. But remember, everything in life has consequences. I hope you're prepared for them." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words, but also a sense of determination I had never felt before. I was ready to step into a world where nobody knew me, where I could be just another person, not the heir to a fortune. I chose a distant city, one where I knew nobody would recognize me. I rented a modest apartment, small, simple, and a stark contrast to the mansion where I had grown up. The contrast was jarring, but also comforting. There was something oddly liberating about the simplicity of it. I had no staff to tend to my every need. No fancy decor to surround me, just a small space where I could breathe. The next morning, I put on the simple receptionist uniform I had been given. The reflection in the mirror was strange. This was not the man I had ever imagined myself becoming. A millionaire heir, about to live as a common worker, hiding behind a disguise. But the more I looked at myself, the more I realized it was the only way to find the truth I had been searching for. I wanted to find love. Real love. Not love tied to money. I wanted to connect with people. Not for what I could give them, but for who I was. When I arrived at the hotel on my first day, I was greeted by Melissa Collins, the hotel manager. She was a woman in her 30s, blonde, with a warm and professional demeanor that immediately made me feel welcome. She gave me a tour of the hotel, explaining everything in detail, showing me the ins and outs of hotel operations. It was strange to see the hotel from this angle, from the perspective of an employee. As the heir to this empire, I had always been distant from the daily workings of the hotel. But now, in this new role, I was learning about it from the ground up. As we walked through the hotel, I couldn't help but notice the way Melissa interacted with everyone. There was an air of respect and kindness in the way she spoke to her team, an authenticity I had never encountered before. She was genuine. The kind of person who truly cared about her work and the people she worked with. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just impressed by her professionalism, there was something about her that I couldn't quite put into words. She was more than just a manager, she was someone who seemed to have a real heart. As the days passed, I found myself drawn to her in a way that I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just admiration for her competence or her professionalism. It was something deeper. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. I was falling for her. And I could tell she was noticing me, too. We began spending more time together, talking during breaks and after work. I couldn't help but feel that this connection, this bond between us, was something real. But the question remained, would she love me for who I truly was? Or would the truth about my wealth tear us apart before we even had a chance to see where this could go? The days that followed were filled with new routines, learning experiences, and the small joys of discovering a world that wasn't dictated by wealth and privilege. At the hotel, I spent my days working the front desk, dealing with guests and staff alike. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. I interacted with people who didn't know who I was, who didn't care about my name or my family's fortune. And it felt good. Melissa and I continued to grow closer. At first, it was just the occasional small talk during breaks or while we were passing each other in the hallways. But soon, those brief moments turned into long conversations, where we discussed everything from our pasts to our dreams for the future. I learned that Melissa had always dreamed of traveling the world but had never had the opportunity to do so, especially without the constraints of expectations. Her eyes would light up whenever she talked about the idea of traveling. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that I wanted to be a part of that dream, her dream. One evening, while we were enjoying a quiet coffee in the hotel's small cafe, the topic of travel came up again. You know, Melissa said, stirring her drink absent-mindedly, I always thought it would be amazing to just pick up and go, without anyone expecting anything from me. To experience the world as it is, not as a destination on some checklist. I smiled, agreeing with her. I've always wanted that too. The freedom to travel without all the attention that comes with my name. We both fell into a thoughtful silence, lost in the idea of what it would be like to escape the confines of the lives we had built. It was a feeling I hadn't realized I was missing. The simple joy of dreaming without restrictions. Our connection was undeniable. And every day I found myself looking forward to seeing her. There was something about the way Melissa treated everyone at the hotel, with kindness and patience, that made me admire her more and more. Her professionalism was inspiring, but it was the way she made people feel seen, heard, and respected that truly captured my heart. I started to realize that I wasn't just falling for her as a colleague or a friend. My feelings for her were deeper, more complex. I wanted to know her, really know her, beyond the surface-level interactions. I wanted to share my world with her, but I was also scared of how she would react when she found out the truth about who I really was. Edward, the maintenance manager who had become something of a mentor to me, noticed the change in me before I even recognized it. One afternoon, we were sitting in the hotel garden, enjoying a rare moment of peace after a busy morning. "You know, James," Edward began, his voice gentle, "there's something different about you lately. I can see it in your eyes. A kind of spark." I glanced at him, unsure of what he meant. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. He smiled knowingly. "You've got it bad, haven't you?" I frowned, not fully understanding. "Got what bad?" Edward's smile widened, and he nudged me with his elbow. "You're falling for her, aren't you, Melissa?" I couldn't help but laugh, though it felt a bit awkward. "I think you're right, Edward. I never expected it. But I feel something for her. Something real." Edward nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "You know, James, sometimes love finds you when you least expect it. But the trick is not to rush it. Take your time. True love doesn't need to be hurried. It'll come naturally." His words hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. I knew Edward was right. I had spent so much of my life trying to force things, forcing myself to fit into a world that was not really mine. But with Melissa, it was different. I wanted to let things unfold naturally, to not rush into anything. As the days turned into weeks, my feelings for Melissa only grew stronger, and I began to realize that I wanted to take the next step. I wanted to ask her out, to see if we could explore whatever this connection between us was. But I was scared. I didn't want to jeopardize the friendship we had built. And I certainly didn't want to complicate things with my secret identity. But I couldn't ignore it any longer. One evening, after a particularly long day of work, I decided to take a chance. I found Melissa in the cafe again, sitting by the window, lost in her thoughts. She looked up as I approached, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual but failing to hide the nervousness in my voice. "Hey, James," she replied with a warm smile. "How's your day been?" I sat down across from her, my heart pounding. "It's been good. But I was wondering, are you free tonight? I thought maybe we could go out for dinner, a movie and some time together. What do you think?" Her eyes widened in surprise, but the smile on her face said it all. "I'd love to," she said, her voice soft and genuine. Relief flooded through me. I hadn't expected her to say yes. But there it was, an opportunity to take things further, to find out if what I was feeling was reciprocated. We agreed on a time and met later that evening, both a little nervous but excited. The night unfolded perfectly. We laughed, shared stories, and enjoyed each other's company in a way that felt so natural, so right. As the evening drew to a close, I found myself walking her home, both of us lost in the warmth of the moment. Under the starry sky, she turned to me, her eyes filled with something new. "James," she said, her voice soft, "this has been one of the best nights I've had in a long time." "I feel the same," I replied, my heart racing as I reached for her hand. We stood there for a moment, lost in the magic of the evening. And then, almost without thinking, I leaned in and kissed her. It was soft and gentle, the kind of kiss that felt like the beginning of something new. As we pulled away, I knew that things between us had changed. There was no going back now. We were starting something real, something that had the potential to be beautiful. The days that followed our first date were filled with a sense of anticipation. We both felt something changing between us, something that was undeniable. Each time I saw Melissa, my heart skipped a beat. She had this way of making everything feel lighter, as though the weight of the world could be lifted with a single smile from her. I began to realize that this wasn't just a fleeting infatuation, It was something deeper. Something that could change my life. But despite the growing connection between us, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living a lie. Melissa had no idea who I truly was. And I was terrified that if I told her, I might lose everything we had built. I had spent so much of my life hiding behind my family's wealth. And now, with Melissa, I wanted to experience something real. Something that had nothing to do with money. But could I truly have a relationship with someone without her knowing the truth? One evening, as we sat together in the small garden at the hotel, I knew it was time to tell her. We had spent the last few weeks getting closer, and I didn't want to risk losing her by keeping such an important part of my life hidden from her. Melissa, there's something I need to tell you, I began, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked at me with concern, her brow furrowed. What's wrong, James? She asked, sensing the tension in my voice. I've been lying to you, I admitted, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Not intentionally, but I've been hiding who I really am. I'm not just some random guy working at this hotel. My name is James Adams, and I'm the heir to the Adams Hotel chain. I've been pretending to be someone else. Someone without the wealth and expectations that come with my family's name. There was a long silence between us. And for a moment, I thought she might walk away. But then, Melissa took my hand in hers, her eyes softening. I'm not angry, James, she said quietly. I'm just surprised. I exhaled. The weight I had been carrying for so long finally lifting. I never wanted you to think I was just interested in someone who only cared about my money. I wanted to know you for who you are, not because of who I am. Melissa smiled gently. I understand, she said. You've been through a lot, haven't you? Living in the shadow of your family's expectations. Constantly surrounded by people who want something from you. It must be hard. I nodded, grateful for her understanding. It's been difficult. I've never had someone love me for me, without the influence of my family's wealth. And I wanted to find someone who could see beyond that. Melissa squeezed my hand. You're not the only one with baggage, James. I've been in relationships before where people wanted something from me, and it was never about who I really was. But now, I can see that you're genuine. And that's what matters to me. I felt a surge of relief wash over me, knowing that despite the truth I had shared, Melissa wasn't turning her back on me. She saw me for who I truly was. And that made everything feel more real. As the days passed, we grew even closer. But there was still something I hadn't shared with her, the history between our families. I didn't know how or when to bring it up. But I knew it was time to be honest with her about the connections between my family and hers. I had learned that Melissa's father, Edward, had been close friends with my late father, Charles Adams, and I had come to realize that there was a deeper bond between our families than I had initially understood. One Sunday afternoon, as we walked through the park near the hotel, I finally decided to tell her everything. Melissa, there's something I need to explain, I began, my voice tense. I don't know if you realize this, but your father, Edward, and my father were close friends. They worked together in the early days of the hotel business. It's part of the reason why we feel such a strong connection. Melissa stopped walking, turning to face me with a puzzled look. Edward? My father? She asked, her voice tinged with confusion. Yes, I said. Edward has been a mentor to me, and he was there for my family when things were tough. He's like a second father to me. But I've come to realize that he's also been a key figure in your life. Melissa's eyes widened as she processed the information. I had no idea, she whispered. But it makes sense now. Why you and Edward seem so familiar with each other. Why he's always been so supportive of you. I nodded, feeling the weight of the revelation settle between us. I didn't want to keep anything from you, Melissa. But I think it's important for you to know the truth about our families. Melissa took a deep breath and smiled. I'm glad you told me, she said, her voice soft. It explains a lot. I guess we've both been carrying around secrets. Haven't we? I smiled back, feeling a new sense of peace. It seems so. The connection between us deepened after that conversation. We both realized that our families were intertwined in ways we hadn't fully understood. But now, we were ready to face whatever came next, together. That evening, as we sat on the porch of the hotel, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Melissa turned to me and said, "James, I think we're ready for the next step. I want to get to know your family more. And I want you to get to know mine. I think it's time for both of us to be completely honest and open." I nodded, knowing that she was right. It was time to stop hiding. Time to face the future with honesty and trust. And with that, we made plans to meet my mother, Linda Adams, the following weekend. I didn't know what to expect. But I knew one thing for sure: I was ready to take this next step with Melissa by my side. The weekend finally arrived. And with it, the excitement and nervousness of meeting my mother, Linda. For so long, I had been living a life of secrecy. But now, everything was starting to unravel. The idea of introducing Melissa to my family felt both exhilarating and daunting. I had already opened up about who I truly was. But this was a whole new level, sharing my world with someone who was, in many ways, an outsider. And I, in turn, had to prepare to meet her family. Melissa and I set off early that Saturday morning for the journey to the Adams mansion. Located just outside of the city, the estate was a breathtaking reflection of my family's legacy, with its towering gates and expansive gardens that stretched endlessly beneath the open sky. As we approached the mansion, I could feel the tension build within me. What if Melissa didn't like my mother? What if my family's wealth made her uncomfortable? I looked over at Melissa, who seemed calm and composed, though I could see the flicker of nerves behind her bright eyes. She was dressed simply, but beautifully, her appearance reflecting the elegance that had always captivated me. "You okay?" I asked, my voice softer than usual. "I'm good," she replied, giving me a reassuring smile. "I'm just excited to meet your mom. I'm sure she's wonderful." I hoped she was right. The thought of Linda's sharp and discerning eyes studying Melissa made me feel uneasy. My mother had always been a woman of power, controlling the operations of the hotel empire with a grace that came from years of experience. She wasn't the warmest person, and I wondered how Melissa would respond to her. But Melissa's words had given me confidence. I could already see how strong and understanding she was, and I was hopeful that she could handle whatever my mother threw her way. We arrived at the mansion, and as we walked up the steps, I felt a deep sense of nostalgia wash over me. This was the place where I had spent much of my childhood, the place that had shaped the man I was today. As the door opened, I was greeted by my mother's warm embrace, and she immediately drew Melissa in with a genuine kindness that I hadn't expected. She was often distant with new people, but there was something about Melissa that seemed to break down her walls. "James, it's so good to see you, my son," Linda exclaimed, her voice a mixture of affection and control. She turned to Melissa, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. "And you must be Melissa. I've heard so much about you. It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Melissa smiled, offering a slight bow of respect. "The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Adams. Please, call me Linda," my mother insisted, motioning us into the grandiose living room. "We'll have plenty of time to talk over lunch." I could see that Melissa was slightly overwhelmed by the opulence of the mansion, but she held herself with grace. I felt an immense sense of pride as I watched her navigate this world so naturally. Linda led us into the dining room, where an elegant table was already set. The conversation flowed smoothly as my mother asked Melissa about her family and her work at the hotel. And Melissa, in turn, asked about Linda and Charles's love story. As the conversation deepened, I noticed that my mother seemed more at ease with Melissa than I had ever seen her with anyone else. She spoke fondly of my father, Charles Adams, sharing memories of how they had built the hotel chain together from the ground up. Hearing these stories made me realize just how much I missed my father and the values he had instilled in our family. Melissa, too, was visibly moved by the conversation. She asked questions about how my parents had navigated the challenges of their relationship. And Linda answered with the honesty and wisdom that I had always admired. The stories about their early days together were filled with passion and perseverance. And as I watched Melissa listen intently, I felt more connected to her than ever before. After lunch, Linda suggested a walk through the mansion's gardens, and we spent the afternoon strolling among the roses and statues that adorned the grounds. The weather was perfect, and the atmosphere was calm and relaxed. It was clear that Linda had taken a liking to Melissa, and I felt a sense of relief that my mother wasn't as intimidating as I had feared. It wasn't until later in the evening, when we were sitting in the cozy living room by the fire, that the conversation took a more serious turn. As the night grew darker, I felt the weight of everything I had been hiding coming to the surface. The connection between Melissa and my family had deepened, and I knew it was time to share something that had been haunting me for years. Melissa, I began, my voice trembling slightly, there's something else I need to tell you. It's about my mother, and it's something I've never shared with anyone. She turned to me with a concerned expression, her hand finding mine. What is it, James? I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. My mother has been the one running the business for years. She's always been the one making the decisions, and I've always felt like I was just the heir to the fortune, never really having control of my own life. But the truth is, I've been afraid of stepping into the role of taking over the company. I've been hiding behind the success of the family name, and I don't know if I'm ready to take on the responsibilities that come with it. Melissa's eyes softened, and she squeezed my hand. James, I understand. But you're not alone in this. You have a family that loves you. And I'm here for you, too. You can't let fear hold you back. Her words were like a balm to my soul, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone in my journey. The weight I had been carrying lifted, and I knew that, with Melissa by my side, I could face whatever came next. But there was still one more thing I had to do. I want to be honest with you, Melissa, I said, my voice steady now. I've been hiding from my responsibilities, and it's time for me to step up. I'm ready to take control of my life and my future, and I want you to be part of it. She smiled softly, her eyes filled with understanding. I'm ready, too, James. Together, we can face whatever comes next. As the evening came to a close, we left the mansion, feeling more connected than ever before. The journey ahead was uncertain, but I knew that with Melissa by my side, we could overcome anything. Our families were bound by history, and now, our futures were intertwined. The bond we had forged that evening was only the beginning, and I was ready to see where it would take us. The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions and adjustments. After the honesty shared with Melissa and my mother, I felt lighter. But the complexities of our lives weren't quite resolved yet. I knew there were still challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face them. The road to building a future with Melissa wasn't going to be easy, but I was determined to make it work. We continued to spend time together, growing closer with each passing day. I noticed a change in both of us. There was a newfound openness that we hadn't had before. No more secrets. No more fears. Just two people, learning how to navigate life's uncertainties hand in hand. One evening, after a particularly long day at the hotel, Melissa and I decided to take a walk along the beach near our place. The cool evening air and the soft sound of the waves made the perfect setting for another deep conversation. You know, Melissa said as we walked, I've been thinking a lot about the future lately. About what comes next. I looked at her, curious, though I had an idea of where this might be heading. What do you mean? About us. About how we're building something. But I still feel like there's more to learn, she continued. Her voice calm but thoughtful. It's not just about us as a couple, but about what we're becoming individually as well. I paused for a moment, reflecting on her words. Melissa had always been wise beyond her years. And as much as I thought I knew about myself, I realized there was so much I had yet to understand. I agree, I said finally. We both have so much to learn. And maybe that's part of the journey, growing together and individually. I think that's why it's so important to take it slow, she said with a smile. We're both in the process of discovering new parts of ourselves. And I don't want to rush that. We don't need to have everything figured out right now. Her words were soothing, and I felt a sense of peace wash over me. For so long, I had been rushing through life, caught up in the whirlwind of expectations and responsibilities. But with Melissa, I realized that slowing down wasn't just okay, it was necessary. As we walked, I noticed how her presence seemed to calm my racing thoughts. The future still felt uncertain. But with Melissa by my side, I knew that I had the strength to face whatever came our way. The days turned into weeks, and our bond deepened. I continued working at the hotel, gaining valuable insights into the world outside the bubble of my family's fortune. I found that I was much more capable than I had given myself credit for. Every interaction with guests, every challenge at work, was a reminder that I had much more to offer than just the wealth and name I had inherited. Melissa and I began to talk more openly about our plans. She shared her dreams of one day owning a business. Something small but meaningful. Maybe a cafe, she said one afternoon, where people could just relax and feel at home. You know, a place where everyone belongs. I could see the passion in her eyes, and it inspired me. I had always been too afraid to pursue my own passions. But Melissa's words reminded me that it was never too late to start. I can see you doing that, I told her one evening. You have a way of making people feel special. I think that's a gift. Melissa smiled softly at the compliment. Her eyes filled with gratitude. Thanks, James. That means a lot to me. It was these simple moments, the quiet exchanges between us, that began to build the foundation of our future together. There was no pressure, no rush. We were creating a life based on trust, respect, and a shared vision of what could be. But as time went on, there were moments of doubt that crept in. I began to wonder if I was really ready for everything that came with being a part of a family like mine. The pressures of legacy, the weight of expectations, it all seemed so overwhelming at times. But when those doubts arose, Melissa was always there, reminding me of what truly mattered. You've already proven so much to yourself, James, she told me one evening, her voice steady and comforting. You don't have to prove anything to anyone else. What matters is who you are, not the title or the money. Her words resonated deeply within me. She was right. I had spent so much of my life trying to live up to someone else's expectations. But now, with Melissa, I realized that my true worth came from within. I didn't need to hide behind my family's name or wealth anymore. I could simply be myself. As the weeks passed, the connection between us only grew stronger. We began to talk more about our future, about where we wanted to live, and what kind of life we hoped to create. It wasn't about the grand gestures or the luxury, it was about creating something meaningful. Something that was ours. One evening, as we sat on the balcony of my apartment overlooking the city, I turned to her and said, Melissa, I think we're ready to take the next step. She looked at me with a mixture of surprise and anticipation. What do you mean? I mean, I'm ready to be with you. Truly. I'm ready to face whatever comes next. Together, I said, my heart racing with emotion. Melissa's eyes softened, and she nodded slowly. I feel the same way, James. I'm ready too. It was in that moment, beneath the stars and the soft hum of the city below, that I realized just how far we had come. Our journey was just beginning, but I had never been more certain of anything in my life. We were in this together. And no matter what obstacles lay ahead, I knew that with Melissa by my side, we could face them with love, trust, and patience. The weeks that followed were a testament to the strength of our bond. Melissa and I had begun to face life's challenges not as individuals but as a team. Every new hurdle, whether at work or in our personal lives, was an opportunity for us to grow together. But while we were building our relationship, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that things from my past might resurface. I was still James Adams, the heir to a well-established hotel chain, and that fact, whether I liked it or not, had a way of creeping into my life. As much as I wanted to be seen as just James, the man who had started fresh in search of real love and meaning, there were always people who knew my name. It was during one of our quiet dinners at the small restaurant near the hotel that the reality of my situation hit me once again. I had just shared with Melissa my concerns about being constantly judged for who I was and not for who I had become. Her eyes softened with understanding. But there was a slight pause before she spoke. "James," she began, her voice calm, "I know you're worried. But you can't let your past control you. It's easy to feel trapped by expectations. But we're building something real. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're less than who you are. Because I see the real you. And that's the person I've fallen for." Her words, as simple as they were, gave me a sense of relief. It was as if she had just removed a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged. But, still, there was the matter of my family's legacy. I knew that one day I would have to confront it head-on, especially since my mother, Linda, had already expressed her concerns about my decision to work in a humble capacity. I couldn't escape my heritage forever. One afternoon, while I was sorting through some papers at the hotel, I received a call from my mother. Her voice was laced with both concern and determination. "James," she said, "I need to talk to you. It's about your future. You can't avoid your responsibilities forever. The company needs you. We need you." I sighed, feeling that familiar tension rise in my chest. "Mom, I've told you before. I'm not ready. I'm still finding my way. And I don't want to just inherit everything because of my name. I want to earn my place. Not just take what's been handed to me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then my mother spoke. Her voice softer now. "I understand, James. But you need to know that there's a lot at stake. I want you to succeed. But don't let pride keep you from stepping into the future that's waiting for you." I didn't know how to respond. My mother's words were a reminder that I couldn't run from my legacy forever. But, at the same time, I wasn't sure I was ready to take on the family business in the traditional sense. My heart had changed since I had started working at the hotel. I had a new perspective on life. One that didn't rely on wealth or status. The conversation with my mother weighed heavily on me as I went about my daily routine. I had become more involved at the hotel, making meaningful connections with the staff and customers. But something about my mother's words lingered, pulling me back to a reality I wasn't sure I was ready for. Meanwhile, Melissa and I had been spending more time together, and I could feel our relationship evolving. She had been a constant source of support, understanding my hesitation and encouraging me to follow my heart. I found myself looking forward to the quiet moments we spent together, the ones where we could talk about our dreams and share our deepest hopes. One evening, while we were walking through the city after work, Melissa turned to me with a thoughtful expression on her face. "James," she said, "I know this is difficult. But you need to listen to your heart. Don't let anyone dictate your path. You've already taken such a brave step by working at the hotel. But you deserve to follow your own journey. Don't let your past hold you back from the life you've worked so hard to build." I stopped in my tracks, gazing at her as her words sank in. "But Melissa," I started, "my family has always expected so much from me. I've never been able to live for myself. It's always been about the name, the reputation, and what's expected. I don't know how to break free from all that." She reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "You don't have to break free from anything, James. You're not your family's expectations. You're James Adams, someone who's learned to care for people beyond their wealth. Who's found what truly matters. In that moment, something clicked within me. I didn't need to be bound by my family's legacy or expectations. I could still honor what they had built. But I didn't have to live their life. I could create my own. But even as I felt a sense of clarity, I knew that things weren't going to be easy. The road ahead was still uncertain. And there would be more tough decisions to make. But I had Melissa by my side. And with her support, I felt stronger than ever. The next day, after a long night of reflection, I made a decision. I would talk to my mother. But this time it would be different. I would tell her the truth about what I wanted for my future, not the future that was expected of me, but the one I wanted to create with my own hands and heart. And so, I prepared for the conversation that would change everything. As I walked into the hotel lobby, I felt more determined than I had in a long time. The future was still uncertain. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready to take the next step on my terms. In the end, James found the strength to break free from the shadows of his family's legacy. With Melissa by his side, he chose to forge a future built on love, honesty, and his own ambitions. He realized that true happiness wasn't found in wealth or societal expectations, but in meaningful connections and staying true to himself. Together, James and Melissa embraced the unknown, determined to create a life based on mutual respect and shared dreams. They proved that no matter how difficult the journey, love and understanding could overcome any obstacle. Thank you for watching today's story. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to stay updated with new and inspiring life stories. See you in the next video.